So early in our research, Eric and I engaged with some of the writing and thinking of the speakers who are going to be talking with us today, and found their thinking very influential for the way in which, for its kind of creative and individual approach to questions around the medium of painting at this moment. With that in mind, we invited Michelle, Jan, and Bruce, who I'll introduce in a minute, to come and present some current thoughts on painting. The rather expansive nature of the title, Painting in the Present Tense, is meant to signal the open-ended nature of today's event in relationship to the conversation. Without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and they are Michelle Grabner, who a lot of us are very familiar with in the Twin Cities, who's professor and chair of painting and drawing at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, has exhibited her work nationally and internationally. She's a regular contributor to Art Forum, Art Agenda, and Extra, and co-edited The Studio Reader. She was appointed visiting professor in painting printmaking at Yale University School of Art in 2011, and is one of the curators for the 2014 Whitney Biennial. With her husband, Brad Killam, Grabner runs the artist space The Suburban in Chicago and the Poor Farm in northeastern Wisconsin. Bruce Hainley is a contributing editor of Art Forum and is the author of No Biggie, Foul Mouth, and with John Waters' Art, a Sex Book. The 5th issue of Pep Talk is dedicated to his writing, and his book on Sturdivant, Under the Sign of Sick, will be published by Semiotext later this year. He teaches at the Art Center College of Design and lives in Los Angeles. Okay. Jan Verwoert is a critic and writer on contemporary art and cultural theory based in Berlin. He is contributing editor of Frieze magazine. His writing has appeared in different journals, anthologies, and monographs. He teaches at the Piet Zwart Institute, Rotterdam, and the De Appel curatorial program, and the Hamidrisha School of Art, Tel Aviv. He is the author of Bazjan Ader, In Search of the Miraculous, MIT Press, After All Books, 2006, and the essay collection, Tell Me What You Want, What You Really, Really Want, Sternberg Press, Piet Zwart Institute, 2010. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Michelle, and once again, thank you all for being here.
I'd like to thank Bart and Eric and congratulate both of you for an excellent exhibition and all the artists. Amazing. It's a treat to be here. Painter, painter. Painter as painter, painter and painter, painter to painter. All social relations, all bodies. Turn back the clock to 1972, and we have painters painting. Speeding up Emile D'Antonio's 116-minute classic film to a zany 8-minute composition, we can see most profoundly the difference between the painter, the perpetually moving body as it prattles on for the camera, and the painting, that still thing that clings firmly to the wall. That still thing that presents us with pauses and rests amid the fluttery gesticulations of the film's painters. Barnett Newman, William de Kooning, Frank Stella, Kenneth Nolan, Hans Hofmann, Robert Motherwell, Larry Poons, Jasper Johns, and Robert Rauschenberg. And by speeding up this documentary, I spare you all from the drawn-out and self-possessed stammerings of Jules Olitsky. But I also deny you the elegance of Helen Frankenthaler declaring of her 7-by-9-foot masterwork, Mountains and Sea, painted in 1952, that, quote, I don't want the sign of the brush or how the picture was made to appear. That area not painted did not need paint because it had paint next to it. This sped-up look at American post-war painters, their paintings, their studios, their exhibitions, reminds us that painting is not painter, or conversely, painter the painting. Painting can be beside itself. Painters can be beside paintings, in paintings, and even on them. And of course, painters can be beside painters. But in the end, there is a body and there is a thing. This may all be obvious ontological assertion, or perhaps these differences are breaking down in the studio. In 2010, as Bart said, I co-authored The Studio Reader, published by the University of Chicago Press. The book and corresponding exhibition called Picturing the Studio commenced in 2008 as an attempt to emphasize the space of artists. As an artist, I was exhausted with the fanatical, all but lucrative space of distribution and consumption, always winning the discourse of the day. Needless to say, I'm still exhausted. I commissioned essays and invited artists to contribute writing that examined their understanding of the studio. Instead of writing, the contemporary painter Amy Sillman took a different route. She composed a photograph of her belly button. She doubled it and drew in pupils and eyebrows, making a set of eyes. The studio is the body, she said. For her, it is that simple. Unfortunately, my co-editor was having nothing of it, and despite my arguments, the image of Amy's studio never made it into the publication. I also composed a new, faster version of Painter's painting for the classroom. For years, it was the didactic exemplar of abstract painting, and it was shown in painting studios and art history lecture halls throughout American universities. With compulsory mid-semester timing, I recall painting teachers at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, all old white men, wheeling in film projectors into the painting studios for screening. These professors would relish in the film's sweeping authority, while we students suppressed laughs and made fun at the film. This was the mid-'80s, and when it came time for me to fold Painter's painting into my own course curriculum, it was exclusively an object of critique and ridicule. That brings us to undergraduate and graduate painting studios today. If the documentary is shown at all, students are reactionless. There are no chuckles or eye rolling. And if there are tears, it is not out of reverence, but out of boredom. So voila, an 8-minute version. But of course, this faster film only creates more questions. Just how fundamental is the renegotiation of painting's temporality in contemporary abstraction? If abstraction now dances in step with the temporality and the materiality of everyday life, effectively paralleling domestic forms of labor, does this also mean the Hegelian desire for higher reach is off the table? Can painting's conviviality with so many other forms of address go wrong? And just what can't be negotiated in the practice of painting? Or a more equally difficult question, what can be negotiated into it? These, in addition to Bart and Eric's questions, why choose the material of painting? What does it mean for an artist to assume the role of painter today? And just what is at stake for a new generation committed to the medium? I would also ask, what is at stake for a new generation committed to the language? It's a very different question. We are good at saying that contemporary abstraction is in a perpetual state of becoming. But can we also say this about Matisse? Does contemporary abstraction remind us that the labor of art is a grossly layered endeavor that often gets mystified in our enthusiasm for the canvas as an icon of market value, distancing us from the complex artistic process and cultural forces that determine when a canvas becomes a painting? I am pulled to the curator Maria Lind's thoughts about the documentary as a lens in which to think about contemporary abstraction. She says that you could actually look at the last 20 years of art through two lenses. One is the documentary, the other is abstract. The documentary has become known for wanting to touch the real, wanting to address real conditions, knowing the difficulties involved in terms of authenticity, in terms of directness, etc., and not giving up the need and the necessity to keep on prodding those very real conditions. What I find important with a lot of documentary practices, she goes on to say, is that they are precisely trying to move away from the one-to-one relationship. Documentary practices complicate and elaborate the means of representation. The other strand, abstraction, does so too, but in a more easily identifiable way, because, she says, You have visual language, and it's not figurative. To conclude, I would like to read a short observation by an artist who too laughed when he viewed painters painting as a young artist. He says, over the past 2 years, there has been a gradual increase of interest in abstraction. During this time, I've puzzled over what this so-called return to abstraction could mean. I still can't imagine it. For me, abstract painting finished with the black paintings of Frank Stella. The goal of modern painting, which represented nothing but its pure form, has been attained. When I began working, my objective was to find a way to make paintings discursive rather than monotopical. It is now possible to use our experience of the elements of paint for their associative powers within the poetics of painting. Poetics could also embrace broad topics such as memory and presence, materiality and transcendence, and the flattening of high and low. It is towards this end that I have painted the biomorphic and the decorative, the mark of the loaded brush and the geometric, the psyche and popular culture. I want painting that's operative. I am seeking subject matter, not abstraction. And the kick here is that it was written in 1986 by Jonathan Lasker. Sounds like it could be written today. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for coming this afternoon. I think I will try to follow up on what Michelle was saying. Also going to start with the old guys, but in the hope that no, I'll start differently. I mean, what makes painting for me interesting for me is that I consider it a very conceptual medium. You can hide very few things in painting. You can hide more things when you're talking, because on a canvas it usually shows what you've done. So there is something inherent to painting which I would understand as a philosophy of action, a practical philosophy, which you can always read the outcome and the ethos of on the canvas. So for me the question has always been, what does it mean to act in painting, through painting? What kind of forms of action do paintings suggest? And on that level, I want to make 3 propositions. First of all, I want to briefly criticize and mock the heroic model of action that we've inherited in a certain after-war, post-war modernist tradition, where the model of action is a heroic one. It's very much about finality. And action counts if there's something final to it. You bring painting to its logical conclusion. It's all about the end, which has posed a big problem. Like how come we continue with painting after it has been heroically ended so many times? So at some point you have to realize that with each kind of dramatic rebirth of painting, the whole kind of the premises seem somehow strange. No, why are we still talking about painting in this key of a heroic endgame scenario when obviously we need a different philosophy, different concepts for describing what makes painting relevant as an act and enjoyable and truthful. So I want to make 2 propositions as an alternative to this heroic endgame talk, which is one is, it's beautiful, Michelle, that you mentioned the Helen Frankenthaler quote about the color being beside the color, because that's the first concept I want to offer, an idea of the lateral motion, the crab walk or adjacency, the feeling of painting always being next to something, next to music, next to fashion, next to visual culture. So not this kind of the target that you home in on, the bullseye, but no, where the crab goes, no, to the side in a lateral motion. And then finally to talk about something that is very prominent in abstraction and that links abstraction to the life world, which is rhythmicality. And as we know, rhythm is a dancer, and that is a collective form of enjoying the possibilities of action. No, if rhythm becomes an actor, it's not in a dancer. It's not about me or you being the hero of the day. It's about something that is arguably a good groove. Yeah? And so from the endgame scenario to the crab walk, lateral motion, to a certain idea of rhythmicality. That's where I want to take this. But first, let me continue the mocking a bit. I mean, I have to say I have enormous respect for the seriousness of someone like Ed Reinhardt. I mean, I think on that level his work is absolutely awesome. But of course, for many people, he embodies this idea of a thoughtful man who knows what he does. No, he knows what he does. Is he a good painter? Yes, he knew what he was doing because he knew about art history. He thought about all the possibilities, and he wanted to bring art history to a conclusion. In that sense, he is the equivalent to a certain understanding of Marcel Duchamp as the smart, as the cat, no, the smooth operator who understands art history and performs a series of chess moves on the board of history, so that as a clear-thinking man, he makes the move, and the move is a transparent entry into the history books, and every move's got to be a game changer. There's this great scene in Cocktails with Tom Cruise, where they're sitting by the pool and saying like, oh God, the guy who invented the bend straw, if only I could come up with an idea like that. We inherited this idea of, okay, these great guys were sitting there thinking, came up with a bend straw, wrote history. They won the game, but here winning the game also means ending the game. No, it moves towards an end because the end is the only thing that counts. No, if you finish first, if you win the game, then you go down in history. Problem is, once you finish the game, there's infinite melancholia. No, that is the downside of this kind of heroic scenario. It's also pretty suicidal. No, in the sense that once you finished art history, how many times can you do it in a lifetime? Maybe 2-3 times, but then there's nothing left to do. Yeah? Which is a despair that a lot of this thinking has left us with. No, like thinking about the band straw, and then afterwards, what do? Retire or give you surrender to this infinite melancholia. And I think a lot of postmodernist artists made fantastic jokes about that. And this is Sigmar Polke here saying, higher beings commanded me to paint the right upper hand corner of the painting black. It's a joke about that kind of attitude, but at the same time it talks about painting in the key and in the sign of its end. No, like the big guys bury it, and the little cheeky brother comes along and makes funny jokes on the funeral of painting, but it's still all in the name, sign, and key of an end game scenario. Yeah? So in that sense, I think the moment when we find a real game changer, somebody saying like, why should we really talk about this only in terms of the end? You have someone like Mary Heilman with this absolutely gorgeous painting called Save the Last Dance for Me. And someone who's taken on the full challenge of modernism to talk about depth and surface, but in the key of its possible continuation. That dance ain't over yet. We're still dancing. Wait, I'm still having a good time. No, the DJ, please play another song. It's still happening. And you feel like there is a certain kind of rhythmicality to it that is not just mocking, but it is a groovy painting that celebrates the continuation of painting. There is darkness. There is the darkness of Ed Reinhardt still, but there's also the darkness turns into, I don't know, the black latex pants that you might have seen in the pink light of a new wave club in New York in the 1980s. So when you think about it, these are the colors that you would have seen. This is painting, as Frank Naller said, besides colors. This is paintings besides the new wave discotheque, where you understand the contemporary relevance of certain colors. Yes, a certain night, a certain year might have been very black and very pink in the non-stop erotic cabaret, where, yes, of course, painting is a soft sell, but it is also a non-stop erotic cabaret because it's happening next to it. No, this is the crab walking back and forth between the discotheque and the studio, because these two spaces are adjacent to each other, and there is something like a contemporary relevance of certain colors. In Baudelaire's beautiful essay about the painter of modern lives, he talks a lot about makeup and fashion as precisely because of the ephemeral nature, capturing the truth of a historical moment. Discovering, and I mean, Baudelaire, it's fantastic. He talks really about makeup and painting in the same key as capturing the relevance of a modern moment, which I find Mary Heilman is definitely doing, without having to resort to some kind of heroic escapist endgame scenario, because in the non-stop erotic cabaret you also have non-stop ecstatic dancing, yeah? and things get kind of black and pink. Yeah? it's a state of mind, it's a state of being, being in a kind of black and pink scenario. But there's also other spaces, not just the discotheque that is besides painting, that is lateral to painting. Your house is also adjacent to your studio. This is a workshop where someone did some knitwear after Mary Heilman, and it's not even a mockery, it's a true celebration of a Mary Heilman painting because she's been doing it herself. A lot of early Mary Heilman works are canvas objects where the canvas is also rolled out on the floor. And this is a contemporary of Mary Heilman called Harriet Corman, where you realize that the textual quality, yes, we're dealing with painting as colored canvas, and to hang it up is a little bit like hanging up your laundry. No, so the domesticity is a space that exists next to the studio in the same way that the discotheque and the city exists next to the studio. But to speak about domesticity here is not in the key of a withdrawal. That's also great about Mary Heilman, that it's not like, okay, we close the door behind us and privacy is a space to which you retreat. When she brings in furniture into her painting exhibitions, it's quite clear that she takes the studio into the public, but also the public into the studio. The studio to some degree is a salon, is a living room to which you can invite visitors. So what we have here is a dynamic between the studio and the public, where the studio is not private in the same sense that the exhibition space is not entirely public. So we have these two spaces exist next to each other and therefore somehow also permeate each other. Genius of Mary Heilman to articulate that possibility of adjacency. Friend of mine who has been looking into this, Silke Otto Knapp, looking at painting as this thing which is neither entirely private nor entirely public. And an example that she was looking at was the work of Florence Tettemer, a New York-based painter and salon host, whose studio and salon Silke is painting here. Another painting from the series, what she's looking at was that while Florence Tettemer was hosting the New York avant-garde, her living quarters and her studio were separated just by a cellophane curtain. And I understand the point that Silke Otto Knapp is making in these paintings as a way of saying, well, painting is the cellophane curtain. If there's the private space and the public space, painting belongs to neither, because painting is the curtain right between. Painting is the threshold between the private and the public and belongs to neither sphere exclusively. This is a painting by Florence Tettemer where she appears herself in the painting at the back as the host of the evening, with all like Picabia and Duchamp being fashionably eccentric. But where it's quite clear here, and a beautiful gesture which I find Silke Otto Knapp reinforcing here, is that the canvas is the space of hosting. The canvas hosts the social that assembles in front of it. So I think I would suggest that we shouldn't just think of the canvas as a surface of depiction, but as this kind of strange social, the curtain, the veil, the projection screen, or even like the tablette on which you serve the community, the food, or the stage on which the community can assemble. As in this other fantastic painting by Florence Tettemer dedicated to the eccentricity of her favorite guest, Marcel Duchamp. Or if you look at painting as this social stage where different spaces exist next to each other, you might also want to look at the work of Vanessa Bell, here portraying her friends from the Bloomsbury cycle, and Vanessa Bell coincidentally also being the sister of Virginia Woolf. So the space that was next door to her studio was the private publishing house of Virginia Woolf and her husband. And so Vanessa Bell would do these fantastic book covers for her sister's book. This is painting always in a crab walk, going from one space to the other, to the discotheque, to the kitchen, to the publishing house. Back to the non-stop erotic cabaret. The crab walk being one model as an alternative that I would want to propose to the strategical endgame scenario thinking. Another proposition is to think about rhythmic ality as a basic dimension of how in abstract art a canvas is structured. So we are in a modern tradition no longer just talking about composition in terms of, okay, it would be nice to put some blue over here and some red down there, but it's really about finding a rhythm, finding a structure that comes alive. No, not a dead structure, but a rhythmical structure that basically takes the whole thing to another level of experience. What about rhythmicality as this kind of strange vessel that connects the space outside the canvas to the space inside the canvas? One artist who's very fascinating to look at when it comes to rhythmicality, and Sarah Connor is also referencing her in her work in the exhibition, is Sophie Teuber-Arp, who you see one of her compositions here, but while she was painting and teaching during the daytime, she was also taking classes with studying dance with Rudolf Laban, who at the same time was coming up with this experimental form of dance choreography notation. And it's one of those scenarios where it's not entirely clear whether the teacher didn't learn more from the student than the student learned from the teacher. No? So here we have an adjacency between the space of dance and the space of music, but what connects these two spaces is a rhythmicality that can be the rhythmicality of the composition, but that also can be the rhythmicality of a choreography of bodies in social space. No, it's that crossover is always there and possible. And of course, fashion is another place next door. That's Sophie Teuber-Arp dressing up for performance in the Cabaret Voltaire with a friend of hers. No? Like the shape on the canvas can become the rhythm of the body and the way how you dress up for the night. Another fantastic artist talking about rhythmicality is the Polish artist Cartagena Kupo, also first-generation constructivist artist, whose models and are more like three-dimensional paintings, which she called space-time rhythms. Understanding these kind of little table-sized models at basically poetic algorithms, suggesting that with this kind of rhythm you could write a poem, but you could also build a train station. Yeah. So as a universal kind of rhythmical key that you could basically take anywhere, and that the task of the artist would be to act as a space-time rhythmicizer, a synthesizer of rhythms in the urban space. It doesn't matter. It could be the urban space. It could be the space of a page. It could be the space of your studio, because rhythm you can apply everywhere. Another example would be Natalia Goncharova working for the Ballet Russe, taking the canvas, taking the space of the canvas as the space of the stage, where you can develop figures, patterns, costumes that would afterwards also be worn by the dancers of the Ballet Russe. All of these kind of spaces where the adjacency is actually put to work and the vessel for communication and translation is rhythm. I would want to come to the end now. Something that is also so strange about this endgame scenario thinking is that it's very linear. No, it's a kind of strange, naive Neoplatonism that you have an idea and then you put it to work, you execute it. As if the experience of making art was all about going from point A to point B. When the experience that you actually have when you're lost in a work, when you're lost in painting, or I would say when you're lost in writing, same thing, is that it's not so clear where the beginning and where the end is. I remember once having a studio conversation with Thomas Abts, who's painting, so that's Mary Heilmann, Sophie Teuber-Arp, and Thomas Abts. And Thomas Abts here on the side, these paintings are very small, but Thomas Abts works on them sometimes for a year or two, and then they disappear, then they come out again. The amount of time that goes into these paintings is enormous. So I was asking her, like, how do you know that a painting is finished? And Thomas was saying, yeah, you know, I know when it's finished, when it suddenly becomes apparent why I made it in the first place. So that the end is set by the return of a beginning. So, and the beginning that returns in the end is not the same beginning of the white canvas. No, that's where you suddenly realize, in a very profound sense, time in art is not that from a clear beginning and intention to an end, but it is the retrospective discovery or the production of the beginning of what you did. So it's not like the conditions are already there, and according to the conditions you do something. No, but you create the conditions of what you've just created. It's a very, very loopy rhythmical time, which, as a bit of a music nerd, brings me to a certain kind of Gestalt similarity that you see here in the, which is a Roland space echo. It's an analog tape delay where basically you send in a signal into a loop into the tape that spills into the box. So what you basically create is very, very loopy time, and where the loop is not a return of an identical information, but where in the looping partially that tape will erase itself, so it will kind of move the signal along as it loops itself. So loopy time as a return of the beginnings in a strangely irregular fashion. Which brings me to the end. What if we enter the loopy time and space of painting? There is a certain tradition of positivist thought in the Anglo-American tradition where the spirit of self-reflexivity in painting is always formulated in a positivist key. We know Frank Stella, what you see is what you get. No, and I mean, it's an answer to this, tell it like it is. What is it? Yeah, it's a black painting about black paint. And you feel like that may very well be, yeah? But at the same time, there is something, especially about Frank Stella, that is undeniably very, very trippy. Yeah? And how do we get to that kind of strange loopiness, that strange trippiness, when there's obviously something about the painting that is not just mere paint on canvas? Where on a certain profound level, this is not just what it is. That there is some kind of strange notion of non-identity built into it, that undeniably what you see before you is what it is, but it also isn't what it is. It is what it isn't, and it isn't what it is. That's the loopy thing about it. And I'm paraphrasing Adorno here in an awkward sense, but I think there is a truth to it, that on a certain level positivism doesn't help, because the fascination in this loopy echo space is that things are no longer quite what they are, and they are what they're not quite continue to be, and so on. Yeah? So I think we are definitely in need of a different theory of self-reflexivity, where self-reflexivity is not just affirmative. A blue painting is about the color blue, but a blue painting can be about a lot of other things. And as a last musical analogy, I'm bringing in here Wolfgang Tillmann's photo of the holy grail of acid music, which is the Roland TB3 bass synthesizer, a loop machine. And what you get with these synthesizers, and what is basically the secret in loopy dance music, is the so-called filter resonance, filter sweep, or the self-oscillation of a filter, which I'm going to show to you in a moment, is one of the strangest things, because a filter should just kind of physically, mathematically shape the sound wave. But there is a moment when a sound oscillation can produce other objects to oscillate. You know that when you put something in front of a speaker and the object starts to vibrate. But where the filter that filters the curve at some point starts to vibrate with the sound, like an object would do. And in that moment, when the filter starts self-oscillating, it produces the strangest kind of overtones. Everything you have is material reflexivity, like paint on paint. There's no spirits hidden in there. It's just really just the stuff. But the stuff produces the strangest oscillations, where out of a reflexivity, it's not a reproduction of what's already there, but the strangest overtones appear. And now this is gimmick time here. What it sounds like is something like that. So let's say we have a relatively boring bass line. Yeah? We start to make it resonate with itself, and then we shape the resonance. And now you hear the self-oscillation, yeah? And that is basically what you know from every kind of house track, yeah? Where you get the strangest overtones. And this bird song that shouldn't be there, yeah? But that is the bird song of self-reflexivity, in terms of something that is no longer like tell it what it is, tell it like it is. In that sense, I would like to leave you with a kind of two alternative models to the philosophy of just winning the game by concluding it. One is the crab walk into all the adjacent spaces, the kitchen, the discotheque, the city, the house of fashion, and the rhythmicality that moves you along from the space of the social to the canvas and back. And rhythmicality not just in terms of a positivist notion of things being what they are, but rhythm in terms of something that moves it along, that creates a strange oscillation where the world isn't quite as it just is at some point. Something like that, yeah.
Paint them a portrait with your chocolate ice cream soda potion. I'll repeat that. Paint them a portrait with your chocolate ice cream soda potion. The gloss to that directive is this video for Booty and Leaf's soda.
I'm sipping and dipping, I will see lips that you're licking. I got you living and bugging just from my sparkling. I'm sparkling. It's my soda papiage, fizzle forward if you not with it. If you was then get it, pop it, let it drip like a faucet. Painted my portrait with your chocolate ice cream soda potion. I'm foamy for sure, real slick with emotion. Check the motions in my ocean. She thinks she a cool cat, but she don't like the water. Step up to my ocean and dip it with the daughters. We wavy with the waves, make you slave to the rhythm. Get emancipated, put the serum in your system. She thinks she a cool cat, but she don't like the water. Step up to my ocean and dip it with the daughters. We wavy with the waves, make you slave to the rhythm. Get emancipated, put the serum in your system. In lieu of a discursive twirl on painting as candy bukkake, as grooming or fabulous weave, as killer chic or pop advertisement, as self-branding or self-deletion or distraction
or ritual? Let me attempt to put some serum in the system by asking 4 questions. 1. Giorgio Morandi reported that, quote, "For me, nothing is abstract. Moreover, I believe that there is nothing more surreal, nothing more abstract than reality," end quote. Is that a kind of reality that can be breezily, associatively referred to, or only actually confronted in the midst of the struggle of depiction? 2. I have no interest in going on record ad hominem that Jeffrey Deitch's The Painting Factory at MoCA LA was just a depressing turd of an exhibition. Other than Warhol, there really weren't any painters or paintings in the exhibit, but rather artists, and I guess that's fine. When Deitch trotted out his curatorial premise and didn't call it the Art Factory, someone should have read him with a glare that said, "Bitch, please." 3. Foregoing outright atrocity, of which there is so much, too much, isn't the life, body, and face of Michael Jackson in the running for one of the most abstract and painted events of the last century? 4. So I arrive at the opening and luncheon for The Painter. I'm not sure what to expect, but not a sit-down affair catered by Tony but gregarious Brits for 300 or more. The paintings are, well, good. Probably some of them the best the painters ever made. 1 or 2 of them, maybe even great, whatever that possibly could mean anymore. That said, they're also obscenely huge. The sails of a clipper ship deployed less material. Yes, I think that's the word, because everyone often invokes abstraction when talking about these paintings and others, when really, as much as they're about anything, and they are surely about something, i.e. her care with the matters and substances of paint, her smudges in relation to other smudges, her optical effects in relation to, I think, Bridget Riley's and video games, I suppose. They are also sold for more than $250,000 a pop. That's either far, far away from abstraction, as most people consider it. In fact, it's quite material. And the entire déjeuner, a material effect of painting, similar to so many of the taken-to-be ancillary festivities surrounding art, but somehow are always particular to painting, however that's construed. And let's face it, sometimes the taken-to-be ancillary events are more compelling than the art itself. And that's something, I guess. So it's either far, far away from abstraction, or just so much more than the term abstraction can convey. So my final question is, in terms of actual and figurative, that is, art historical, critical, etc., placement, and even a question of perspective, is how should anyone possibly know where to put all of it? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Crosby, assistant curator here at Visual Arts. My head is kind of spinning, but I do want to invite Michelle Grabner, Jan Verwoert, and Bruce Hainley back up to the stage for a brief conversation before we open it up to questions for them. And just keep in mind, we'll have 2 mic handlers up and down the aisle, and please wait to ask your question before you receive please ask your question when you have a mic in your hand so that it can be recorded for posterity. So please come back up. Thank you. A round of applause for them.
grab your mic. I think I talked to both Eric and Bart a little bit about this maybe being the most kind of difficult exchange of the. We can make presentations and we can take your questions, but where would you like to start?
Well, shall I start? Give you a point?
Yes.
A point to start? Well, I was sort of taken by a number of things, namely what you've articulated painting is not linear, but rather recursive and feeding back, kind of loopy time and space that exists there. It's not monotopical, as Lasker tells us, but rather discursive and lateral, subject to various adjacent relationships. And then, and this issue of it not being simply material, but rather something more abstract, relating to life and perhaps even as abstract as the market. Those were some of the strands that I thought connected the three presentations. And I wonder if you feel like, despite your differences, you speak in a shared vocabulary about any of these topics.
Well, certainly we speak stylistically quite different.
Right.
Yeah, I guess my question then, or to kind of expand on what you were saying, Eric, and this maybe is directed at Jan, but the linear, is that exclusive? I mean, that is my problem. And I think that sometimes in life, as you describe painting, that is also the description of life, that sometimes painting needs to maybe take on that linear, albeit a false premise, to work through the conditions of the everyday.
I do agree. If you want something, you might want to get it. That's linear enough on a certain level. But at the same time, I have a feeling that that way of thinking has been imposed to art to such a degree that at some point we always already serve up answers to that linear paradigm, especially when it comes to justifying art in these tedious rituals in art school, for instance. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? And yeah, because I read this by Lyotard. Oh God. Yeah, and on that same, I find it profoundly alienating, and would want. Like from a philosophical perspective, thinking is a way of being in the world, in the same way that painting is, and so I think it has other existential temporalities, I would argue. I mean, like, at the same time, I've been arguing for something non-alienated, so where painting is actually this powerful vessel of connecting different areas of life. At the same time, I realized, Bruce, when you were speaking, that some of these areas that exist adjacent to the market is not just the discotheque or the kitchen or the dance stage. Yes, it's also the market, the collector's home, or where the painting becomes a vessel where money floats through because it satisfies a certain thirst for determining what on earth quality could be today. Yeah. And I'm not quite sure how to talk about that in a non-cynical manner, whether we should just be openly cynical, or whether there is also not a battle going on exactly about the term of quality. So quality judgment is usually understood just in terms of is it good or is it bad, but in terms of a philosophical notion of quality, quality is also the fact that water is wet. That's the quality of water, or that a particular blue is just kind of awesomely blue. And so that, and currently I think a lot about kind of reclaiming the term of quality, to go away from this kind of quality evaluation stamp, performance evaluation, how was I, towards something like, no, oh man, that's pretty blue. Like Karl Marx, at some point, Karl Marx is arguing in a way that also Guy Debord afterwards picks up, to say like what's being privatized is not just the production and the product, but also our senses are private. And he speaks about the need to deprivatize the senses in a way where we would really enjoy qualities, not, okay, this is my quality, your quality, but this is, well, it's been a pretty blue day for everyone involved. So in that sense, I would say, okay, yes, cynicism is necessary to give it that sharp criticism edge, that edge that you have. And
Well, I don't think, I didn't mean to, I don't think of myself as cynical.
then I withdraw the term.
I just, your talk showed paintings by some of my favorite artists. I mean, Stettheimer being way up there, but there's so much kind of candy, delight, wonder in those paintings, but they also are paintings about people shopping and who gets to shop and who doesn't get to shop. And she's from one of the wealthiest families of the moment in New York. And it's just, there are people who get to give parties all the time, and there are people who don't. And I'm just interested what it means to, I guess in terms of how you were talking about the crab walk and its sideways nature and things being adjacent, I guess how I would question that is, what is adjacency right now compared to distractedness? And I can become quite cynical about distractedness and who is actually in control of distracting us. Because I think as soon as you have a screen in your pocket, it's not always up to you when you're distracted. And so that would be, that's what I'd want to think about longer. I mean, we really didn't plan anything we were going to think. So there are these amazing synchronicities between, I think, all three parts of the talk tonight. But there's also some stark differences. But in terms of one of the things I would want to think about is what is the relationship between adjacency and distractedness?
And I could only say to that, I mean, like, the question is something at stake? No, like in distractedness, it's just the pure mechanism playing out its power. But when it comes to, for instance, a rhythm being found, a rhythm that carries it from one to the other space, or a canvas being inserted in between these spaces that relates them in a meaningful way, then there is something happening on that threshold. So a rhythm is put at stake, like the connecting moment. There's something happening there. It's this pattern rather than that rhythm, or that sweep rather than that. So the particularity that kind of sets it apart from a sheer mechanism just playing itself out. Because I often find today, like so many people are just rehearsing the mechanics of attention grabbing or diffusing. Like, okay, to make art that looks like art that could be shown in a New York gallery. And that gets rewarded because it looks exactly like something that would fit the format. And then I feel like, no, can something else happen on that threshold? Just a different kind of rhythm.
Can we just talk, to expand on this a little bit about gender in relationship to the crab walk?
Yeah.
I think you've talked about this before too, Jan, in terms of, if the males were running directly from point A to point B, if we're talking about the New York School or painters or the heroics that you're talking about. And now we have the crab walk, and that seems to be the propriety of the female.
But you were also hinting at that, no, by praising Helen Frankenthaler in the beginning. So what's your take on that?
No, I don't think I was praising her. I was putting her in the same group, but she
Yeah.
was extraordinary. No, but I guess I have a problem with that. I mean, I think there's something, I quite like the analogy, Jan, your analogy of attending to painting the way one attends to dirty laundry and the dirty dishes. I think that's actually quite profound in terms of dealing with the everyday. I don't know if you said that in this talk, or I believe it was something else that I read. But I guess I think there's an alliance to maybe David Justlit's talking about travesty in painting, the trying on, not appropriating, but a kind of travesty, in which that opens up a position for women or otherness when one can dawn on, and as opposed to appropriation. I'm sorry if I maybe do we know that piece, the David Justlit's piece? It was the last Whitney by catalog.
Yeah, but I think this crab walk is not a strategy. It's not something that you pick up consciously. It's a way of inhabiting the world of your practice, and I wouldn't also want to so straightforwardly gender it. Because also a lot of the male heroes did themselves a big disservice by speaking about their work in these terms. Yeah. I mean, Frank Steller's work is more trippy than he would ever acknowledge. So, and sort of basically he's not kind of bringing out that quality of his work, but just feeding into just serving up red herrings to a kind of a positivist expectation of tell it like it is. So I think also these works would profit from being reread in a less heroic key.
But I mean, I don't have they. It's just so funny. It's like, do I think of any of those figures as heroic anymore? I mean, I love those painters, those dudes, and but I also love a lot of other things made at that time by other dudes and other ladies and people working out in between. So like Forrest Best would be a really good example of someone working out some serious in-betweenness. So, T.J. Clark's Farewell to an Idea is, what, almost 20 years ago now? But certainly 15, and that is not reading through heroics, that's reading through it's a kind of vulgarity, and he's very quick to pause so that doesn't just become something that people think that they can make. And he's very deft and defter than I'm going to be in trying to explaining it. But I don't know, it's like, do we still, I mean, I think if anyone's looked at heroically, it's like, in a certain sense, it's like Warhol has worked at heroically. And that wasn't the moment of 1972, but I think there's something about the strangeness of Warhol and when and how he's invoked in really interesting ways and then in extremely tedious ways that I don't know. I found it strange that because I don't want to forego the quest for an epic, and that is tied to potentially heroic endeavors, and I'm really suspicious of giving up that possibility for art.
But in a sense, I don't think that it's time to say farewell to an idea, because I don't think that we've even understood the idea properly. And the moment when you start looking at someone like Sophie Teuber-Arp, for instance, or Cartagena Kupo, who's not in the big collections, when you say maybe that's the real idea of modernism, and the other story was kind of superimposed and is not actually very exciting anymore, and we can go back to this and rediscover modernism in a completely different key, which I find very exciting. And there is also I don't want to play the kind of justice card and be too moral about it, but I think there is career choices that are still being made in terms of how fast can I get from A to B to pay back my student loan, as a pressure that exists and that is still exerted, and where these other modalities of existing and continuing your practice, there are serious existential questions, and there needs to be made room for that. And I mean, the whole idea of moving sideways, I got from Susan Hiller, talking to her and saying, in the heyday of conceptual art, men taking the stage, talking smartly about Kant and Wittgenstein, and she felt like she wanted to be in this arena, but also had other concerns than the analytic philosophy. So she felt like, she was saying, for woman artists at the time, the only thing that you could do was move sideways, which means that actually the work of Susan Hiller has not been so well known, but it's actually far more interesting than all the guys who went from A to B in 5 seconds and then just continued doing the self-same work. So there is some existential drama, there's career models, and there's works that develop differently, and which are only coming out now as potentially being much more interesting.
Do you have questions for us, or can we throw something out to the artists?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this discussion in relationship to the exhibition and some of the works that you can see if you enter into it, and this idea of Eric and I have referred to sort of like painting's many histories, or in some instances painting's minor histories, and there's an idea within the show. I mean, when you walk through it, there's a kind of lot of very moments of sort of familiarity within the sort of history of abstraction and kind of visual culture that seem to be referring back or pulling, or the artists sort of entering into, and of course I'm not saying all of the artists, but in various ways entering into these kinds of alternative modernisms or different modes of thinking through the history of painting that are outside the sort of dominant one, the heroic model that Jan was addressing. And I think for me, there's it seems to me that what might connect this conversation in a sense to the show is that I don't think it's about I don't think heroic and epic are necessarily connected. I think artwork can still have an ambition without being connected to certain very kind of narrow sort of paradigms linked to, say, sort of patriarchy or, you know, this kind of grand mysticism around the painting, you know. And for me, you know, what I see in a lot of the work in the show is a kind of is a sort of an exploration and a comfort with a vast array of sort of histories and information as a way to sort of, you know, clear space and sort of move forward without being involved in that endless conversation that we've talked about before. So I don't know how what you think about that, but obviously I know you're going to go to questions now, but maybe other people will have contributions.
It was a good statement, Bart.
Oh, thank you.
We should open it up. I think
Yeah,
we should.
let's open it up.
We have a question in the front.
Thank you for your presentations. I found it interesting that all of the presentations and kind of the exhibition is being framed as the conversation is now gaining force, and you were talking about the shift from the heroic and the epic of, you know, the first kind of episode in which painting kind of came onto the scene and mattered, and now we're looking back on that period as maybe having been melodramatic and overdone. And I was interested in this piece I heard on The Current a couple weeks ago about this group that turns minor key songs into major keys, like R.E.M's Losing My Religion, and somehow there was something lost in that transition from the minor key to the major. And, you know, Jan, you're talking about trying to figure out different ways to talk about painting that moves away from that very epic or that heroic or existential. And I'm wondering if one or more of you could speak a little bit about kind of what in this moment exactly is kind of engendering that sort of shift, because, you know, it's kind of this desire to move away from that minor key, and yet, you know, the major key isn't quite working. And of course, you know, the reaction to postmodernism is the sense that, okay, let's mind the middle. Let's move away from these binaries of epic or totally not serious. Okay, what is this really interesting ground in between? And so I'd be interested in what your thoughts are about kind of about this current moment.
I'll just jump in a little bit, and I'm going to, I guess, paraphrase or employ a kind of John Kelsey's theory about kind of painting and even moving into sculpture, and that is the idea of throwing up roadblocks. I mean, in terms of the speed of how images kind of move through our lives, the idea, the materiality, and we see this really profoundly in the exhibition here, because these kind of roadblocks, they kind of clot the speed of images, our lives, movement, and so forth. So I think that's pretty interesting, and we haven't really, you know, it's a tricky thing that you're asking, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things within the contemporary context, let alone the histories that you're talking about that kind of set forth, you know, the kind of breadth of what we see in painters, in painter, right? But I'm just throwing out that one in terms of kind of a roadblocking the speed. You know. It's a difficult one.
No, it's something that I try to to somehow formulate by talking about this moment of adjacency is that I always feel like a medium like painting is adjacent to the contemporary like writing is. No, you might be sitting here writing on your writing pad while something else is happening next to, before you might be thinking about what Immanuel Kant thought while you're doing your dishes. Yeah? So this is the kind of a medium that exists parallel to the contemporary and gradually doesn't go away. No, and I think today to think about, yes, the kind of de-acceleration maybe, but also to think about continuation. Now, when everything is framed in the key of crisis, climax, oh, it's going to collapse, we reach the financial cliff, oh no, it's like the kind of the crisis scenario that plays itself out. The question is, how are we even continuing to live and to think? So I think this key of continuation is very important, to not kind of fall into the hysteria of this kind of, no, again, the financial cliff, but that thinking, painting continues, and I think, without sounding too metaphysical, I think that's a strength of criticality, that it finds its own rhythm against the dictate of the email rhythm, whereas, as you were saying, that there is always something else that dictates the rhythm of your life. I mean, my experience also with teaching at an art school, like you have to respect the different rhythm of different artists. Some are very fast people, some are very slow, and I think there's a dignity to that. And then we're no longer talking about narratives, but about modalities, so that you have a certain mode of doing things, and not just because that's authentically yours, but you might be kind of slow for 2 years, then you have a fast year. But it's a particular, not to think in terms of drama or narrative, but in terms of modalities. And in keys, it's interesting that before we arrived at the temperated piano, there was some music was not described in keys, but in modalities. That a certain series of tones would be one modality that would also be connected to a particular sentiment. So that death and mourning would be performed within a certain modality with a certain set of notes, which then would be today translated, I don't know, into the key of D minor. Yeah? Or happiness would be performed within another modality, which would be more a major key. Yeah? So in terms, I think it's interesting to think about thinking and painting and writing in terms of these modalities. It's a mode of thinking, it's a mode of being, it's a mode of criticality that exists, thankfully, that can exist in many modalities, no? And not just in the kind of monopolized modality of fast, last-minute performance evaluation, oh my God, yeah? But so I think it offers parallel modalities, and I think that's a strength in a moment when we have a monoculture of modalities today. Yeah?
I guess I would like to kind of expand on that and think a little bit about your thinking of continuation, and then maybe one of the questions that Bart and Eric posed in terms of painting and a currency. Painting is not in crisis. I mean, there are big things within the world that are, but there's a whole economy, and we were talked about that. So I'm just wondering, and we were talking also, when I start thinking, I talked to both of you about, I guess it's another Jocelyn conceit in which, the idea of, and I think a lot of the painters in the exhibition kind of embody a nearly fundamental relationship to painting being made in time and space. The neoliberal side of things requires speed and movement.
Not to pick a point,
no,
but
go ahead,
like,
please
where
do.
else could it be made?
Well, but to have that, but to have it, very attended.
Yeah, but
attended to.
that Jocelyn essay is just like, it's like he wrote a TV book and doesn't like TV, and I feel the same way about the painting essay. So it's just like, I don't know. It's just like, I really worry, like, when an essay takes on that kind of momentum, and then everyone feels like they must be beholden to it, and it's just like, why?
So Bruce, let's leave the essay behind, but let's still talk about painting as currency. We can leave Jocelyn be, but talk painting as currency. I think that's very important.
But has it ever not been a currency?
No.
That's I think that's what, I guess in terms of the crisis, and not that I don't like these terms, I don't like the terms of like ending, but there is the fact that like, the 19th century was like one of the major art forms was opera. Opera is not the major art form anymore. And things do end, and life goes on. I mean, it's like, you may be a Bizet fanatic, but like, Bizet had his day, and it was a grand day, and it's no longer today, and that's fine. And I wonder what gets lost in terms of trying to gauge how epistemes change, because they do. They're not always coterminous, even though I think they can be. They're not definitive, like, oh, pop ended and now it's this, or modernism ended and now it's postmodernism. And not that anyone on here said that, but I do think that there are closures and things keep on being made in a certain way. But, there was a woodworker who does a particular kind of woodworking, and he was asked to repair kind of the exemplar of this kind of woodworking. There's a single chapel in England, and part of it burned, and he was really the only person on the planet that could do this anymore. And he was being interviewed, and he was like, well, you're talking to the entire field. It's me. And, okay, he's going to die. He's not going to live forever. And right now he said he is looking for people to be interested in terms of what he wants to do and what he expects a kind of carver to be. There isn't. And, I am all for finding new ways, but I also wonder about our, I will make this national rather than international, but our inability to mourn. And we're still not even 5 years off a 8-year, 9-year period when you were not even allowed to see coffins coming into the country. This is getting a wild away, but I think, like, what is the acknowledgement of a change that is a change for something does end and then something new begins? I totally think the loop is important, but when is it a continuation, and when is it, a vicious circle, and when do things just end? And that's not to say that we're anywhere close to that with painting or ever have been, but are there certain things, whether we call them modalities or actual kind of changes, that certain kinds of paintings just seem to not to want to acknowledge, in some ways. So I don't know. And, like, I just wonder, like, it really was nothing about Jeffrey Deitch, who, but that show just, we were talking about this a little bit, it's like, what do we mean by painting anymore? Like, it's everything. There's nothing that was presented today that can't be looked at as, in terms of discursivity, as painting. It's why I showed the video I showed. It's like, there is a mode of discursivity that allows you to talk about that video as painting. I don't particularly find that an interesting way at this point to do anymore, even though I'm perfectly willing to do it and I love that video. So, but I raise it as an issue of, at this point, it's just like I find some of it a little tedious, It's just like, yeah, sure, it's a painting. I don't know what isn't a painting. Stengel would make this carpet a painting. So, it's okay, I don't know. That's not very much of a coherent response, but...
And are we hearing that with optimism and not cynicism?
There's no cynicism. I really am not cynical. I am, but I'm also, how to put it? There are days when I see art, or what passes as art, that I get really excited about. And then there are many days where I go, like, let's just pack this in. And that's something I'm trying to sort through. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I do not think that art is always good for you. I don't think that it, cures things. And that's one of its strengths, And it may be bad for you, and maybe we need to get more at that at times without romanticizing the artist as murderer, but, yeah.
We should take a couple more questions.
Oh, got one right here.
Okay.
Bruce, I remember you talking about the painting itself being the material effect of the painting, and saying something like, where are we going to put all of this stuff? Do you possibly see the painting as object losing potency and more of the effort being the strength of the work, or is it moving back one way or another? Are there any trends? I mean, this is open to all of you, but I'm just interested in hearing what you have to say about that.
Well, I'm interested in effects that painting produces, and I think they're not only the effect of the viewer looking at them or the painter having made them. And the reason I brought up a luncheon is like a lot of what are taken to be ancillary events are actually effects of painting, or that's how I like to look at them. But it's really interesting in terms of one of the last images we saw was a Thomas Abst painting, and I began with Giorgio Morandi. And there's just a fact. I mean, those are two, one living, one dead. I usually always get super geeked and happy when I see a Thomas Abst painting or a Giorgio Morandi painting, no matter where it is. And I don't see how anything could be worth more than that. But then there's also the fact that you learn really quickly that big paintings are just more expensive than small paintings. Mm-hmm. And some people never make big paintings. And what does that do to where they end up and how you get to see them? And that's not to say that, I could move to Bologna and see Morandi's all the time at the Morandi Museum. But, so it's not like I want to replace that. But it does make you go like, oh, there are these, in terms of currencies, there are also different, as in a river, different currents where you get pools that have their own kind of tidal pull and can pull you under, and then there are things that allow you to move really wonderfully across a great distance. And so it's not just currency, it's also paying attention to currents, but there are times when small things, they don't want to scream and they don't want to be bigger, and you either have to be listening clearly or paying attention to those kind of details. And I think it was a happy synchronicity, because I see a relationship between those two painters. It would be hard, not that there are other people, but it's also the relationship of like, what is, in terms of place, since most of Abt's paintings are named for places in Germany, how are her paintings a negotiation of place, and Morandi's paintings a negotiation of a particular place? Two of them basically, one, the studio, and then the place, the kind of summer house that he had away from Bologna. So, I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's the best I can take out of it. So.
But it's a big question, because it also means like, how can we talk about the painting as a material artifact in a non-nostalgic way? Like on the one hand, yes, the fact that it's an object also turns it into currency, an object that can be traded, and that very often then serves as a kind of, as a commodity fetish, because it somehow communicates a sense of value, of objectified value, that an economy that gets more and more abstract cannot convey. Why am I rich? What kind of certifies the value of this? Then you have an infinitely precious object, and then it's worth as a hyper fetish. So there's no reason to be nostalgic about it. While on the other hand, there is something about the particularity, or that it becomes that time capsule of time gone into that thing. And there's always this bizarre thing that we have these kind of multifunction, multi-purpose screens now, that from one screen, I mean, everything can be thrown towards it. And it's always so funny if you're in somebody's studio and they bring out one canvas and then another one, when as opposed to someone giving you a PowerPoint presentation, where it's a kind of one work, one screen, and there is something, one work, one screen, one modality, and how to speak about that without being nostalgic for that oneness, and also without being moral, because of course it implies a certain commitment, but how to speak about that commitment to that one object, that time that goes in there, without selling it as authentic per se. But I like the fact that Nietzsche was talking about the uncontemporary as being important to even understand the contemporary. So in the sense, like, how do we even know what contemporary is if we cannot talk about it in a key of the uncontemporary? We have the multi-screen, the mono-screen talking about the multi-screen, the canvas talking about the digital world, or I don't know, like a guitar pop band like Suede plays a song about techno music called The Beautiful Ones, no? And it's like, in that sense, like there is an uncontemporary medium of guitar pop speaking about a contemporary medium of techno and thereby about its contemporaneity. And I think these parallel moments are important. We wouldn't necessarily know what the contemporary is if we couldn't speak about it from an uncontemporary position. Visual culture as the multi-screen talked about from the mono-screen. I think these exchanges are important because it's only through these exchanges that the contemporary forms in this ping-pong between the uncontemporary and the contemporary. You know?
We have a couple down here.
Jan, I really liked your musical references there, Suede and soft cell and stuff. But I think I kind of missed the point with the 303 and the harmonics that was involved. It was a great explanation, but how did that reference sort of the issue of contemporary painting?
Yeah, just very quickly, because I'm upset and bored with a certain way how reflexivity is talked about. And very often when it comes to self-reflexivity in art, it's either in the key of you have to know what you want to do before you do it, then you're a very reflected painter, or reflexivity in a certain kind of Anglo-American positivist tradition as a blue painting reflecting blueness, where it is what it is. And what I love about this kind of filter oscillation is it's not in any way transcendent, it's not entering another reality. But still on the level of that material reality, it produces difference, where the sounds are not just the sounds that you start from. So where you find a fundamental transformation, where things are no longer just what they are, but there's no magic involved. No, it's just some strange material oscillation that produces difference, non-identity, which is something that is deeply in the material, where the material starts to think, where the material starts to sweat and produce something that is other to itself. And I think we have still not arrived at fully understanding the joys of that otherness coming out of the material. We still talk about self-reflexivity as if it was about knowing what you do, and then you write a PhD about it, or just kind of affirming a square painting talking about squares. And I think to understand how the material thinks, how a painting becomes a brain, yeah, where something is happening here, which is not just, it's a deeply material process, but it's also more than a material process. And for me, the joys of dance music are, this is when the machine, when the sound starts to sweat and sing, and I feel it's an analogy to when a painting becomes a brain and starts to think.
So it's something that the artist just sets in motion and then rides.
Yeah, and it's a thing with these things are terribly difficult to program. So at some point, you just basically gotta let the machine do the work and let the machine think and produce that strange non-identity, which I find very exciting.
And I'm going to interrupt. Jan, can I put you on the spot? I mean, is there work in the Painter that does that?
No, I mean,
there are. I know there are, but to different degrees. I'm just wondering if you would be so kind to point that out.
Yeah, I think it's all of the work. It seems that I always feel awkward about kind of being the critic as the judge, but I feel like you see the tradition of Mary Heilman and Thomas Abts there, that is work that works with the material, the everyday materiality, and an insinuation of, yes, there is something next to this painting. Yep. There is an object that might sit next to it. This besideness is very strong, and a sense of kind of creating surfaces that don't lay claim to any big ideological transcendence, but are still kind of are not just what they are, but without kind of laying claim to big magic. Now, how do you produce that oscillation without the grand narratives? So in that sense, I would But sorry.
Come on, say. I mean, I think that, I feel like if the artists in the show are being sort of subtly crab-stepped away from a kind of direct acknowledgement, as three critics sitting up here, you are also crab-stepping away from your work as much as the artists in the show, which I am one of, just so you understand, I'm shaming myself publicly, but that, if there's this sort of, why are we bothering to do, there's a lot of cynicism, why are we bothering to do this? We're all just market pandering, we're making currency objects, et cetera, et cetera. What I was excited about this show was that there could be an attempt at a proximity of painters talking to each other about painting, seeing each other's work up close, and developing a criteria. If it is a modality, which we are all trying to understand, trying to set in motion and ride, et cetera, which I absolutely agree with these assessments, there are market forces that keep us from understanding one another's practices at any proximity, keep us from understanding one another's thinking at any proximity. So please, step forward, judge, allow us to learn what these practices might be, because I think you've touched on a number of points about modernism that I think are constantly kept at a distance from one another, rather than being allowed to sort of set in motion the dialectics that early modernism was able to set in motion. The ideal versus the material, or the everyday versus the heroic, were constantly being sort of dialecticized. There was, we keep talking about becoming like it's easy. It's dialectical. It's a clash. It's a conflict. There's an agon. And one of those agons can be the critic versus the makers. And I understand that publications like Art Forum, et cetera, are not allowing for real criticism to occur anymore, but in proximity, please, judge.
Yeah, but see, like in a certain level, I don't want to be your father figure. No, I don't want you to put your tiny hand in mine. I leave that to George. Yeah? Because on a certain level, this paternal role model, the demand for the critic to tell you what you want, what you should really, really want, is something that puts, as a critic, puts you in the position that Lacan calls the subject was supposed to know. Yeah, like the person who comes to the China restaurant says to the waiter, well, you should know, I can't read the menu, you should know what I want. Yeah? And you're fucked. Yeah, of course, you will always bring the wrong food, and I'm not going to do that for anyone. Yeah. So I'm going to crab step into studios, out of studios, and try to formulate what I think are potentials, and I cannot implement it for you. And on that's your work. That's your work. That's no. But I definitely won't judge.
I think
I definitely won't judge.
Like, for the critic to come in and a tweet. Is that what you want? That's what this would be. I would never try to do something. Many of the painters in the show I saw for the first time walking into the show. One of the exciting things for me about the show is seeing work I've not seen before. And given that many of the artists in the show made work, specifically new works for the show, no one has seen it before. I don't know how much time some people might need before they write something about the show. And in terms of if we're going to talk about economy of criticism and time deadlines, some people will have to respond by probably next week locally? I don't know. That's not a very long time. But, whatever I think, and any critic, if if you look at a show, you're drawn to certain things immediately and drawn not to. The favorite thing to be is kind of freaked out or repulsed by something that you see again and again, and then a year later it's your favorite thing ever. That's the best experience ever. And so I would no more trot out what I think of this show or the people in it. It's not what I do. I would have to go home and write something, and until writing it, I really wouldn't know what I thought, because that's just the process that this is. And so, this is part of the problem of critical discourse in the age of the tweet and the blog. It's so instantaneous, and there's no fact-checking, or very rarely any fact-checking, and no time. It takes time. I know some things were made probably very quickly, but the person has been working on making paintings for a decade or more. And there's certainly things in the show that took a lot of time to actually make. Well, what what someone might make of the show as critically, you're not going to equal the time of making of the things made, but to do it instantaneously is just something I just have no interest in. Absolutely no interest in. I don't know what it would be. It would be a tweet.
But at the same time, I definitely grant you the point that that demand is there. And also as a critic, you might feel like you're being a bit of a sissy to step away from it. But I would also agree that in terms of the... I mean, you would have to perform a different kind of character. I think the moment that you're judging, you're only plausible if you do it in such an exaggerated way that the act of judgment already kind of lends itself to a counter-judgment. If you would do it some kind of Hunter S. Thompson style, that you already, as you're in the show, you're already... Because then the act of judging is exposed in its proper ridiculousness. Yeah? And you would have to build an entire character around that, which in the long run might also be fascinating to be a kind of a cocaine-fueled judgment machine that artistically performs a caricature of the act of judging. I think that would be... I don't think they have it in me, but if I get the right supply, I don't know, I might... But no. But at the same time, I think that the demand is not off in the same way that the terrible demand for an artist to justify and interpret their work, which you will never be able to do, is always also on. Yeah? On the one hand, we could say, like, why do we do this to ourselves? We don't need to, but at the same time, this impossible demand is always there, and I acknowledge that. But there is someone in the front who's been waiting for... Can we have him still? Because
Okay, one more question. That would be great.
Then that's it.
Yeah.
Third row. Being in the middle.
Thank you. My mind's gone blank. So, when you're talking about art, or any medium really, you have to use labels to define it. And what I'm wondering is, when does a label like painting or painter become meaningless? Yeah. Because it starts with, a leaf video is a painting, and then a beautiful sunset is a painting, and then a carpet is a painting. What isn't a painting? And where do you think the boundary truly lies? Not only physically, but in a more, in a sense of labeling and thought.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen a thing that said, nothing has announced itself to me that said, that I had to challenge as either a painting or not a painting. So what does that mean about the here and now? I'm not sure. As a painter myself, I know exactly what I need painting to be. I know what it can hold. I know how far I'm going to reach for the vocabulary, the grammar, and develop that and so forth. But it's a hypothetical because I can't, I'm watching for it. We should all be watching for it. We should ask those questions, but I don't, it's not going to be answerable. And again, I don't know if, I'll defer to my colleagues.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, what is the role that words play in this whole game? Which I agree is also a power game. No, the right to define what a painting is also establishes you as a powerful interpreter, and how to responsibly work with that power of words. No, on the one hand, I think a responsible or maybe provocative way to work with it is to unframe the categories. Because if you just nail it down to a certain tradition, you are establishing your power by just holding on to conventions. So at some point it might be necessary to turn the label into a metaphor. To say, yeah, also this is a painting and this is a painting. When you use metaphors, you throw the doors and windows open into all directions, and you start speaking figuratively just to unframe kind of normative ways of thinking. Oh, this is also painting. Think about painting as if it could also be this, and then you at least you set your mind free for a moment. Danger is, of course, it can be like a mixed metaphor, and then it gets terribly vague at some point, at which you you return to histories, and develop certain understandings of what structural thought in a particular tradition of painting is, and then it's no longer general painting, but one particular tradition, which can also lock you into a prison of then just kind of seeing everything as a proof of the legitimacy of a certain history. So I think thinking as a modality is about constantly keeping that thing in motion, no? That you think metaphorically when you realize, oh God, no, this is just getting too vague, you return to a particular history. The moment you start speaking like a professor on that, it might be necessary to put a banana skin into your walk so that you slip on a metaphor. But that's, I think, on a certain level, that is the practice of thinking, no? Where it is a powerful game, because you're creating categories that can also be labels for selling it. But at the same time, if you want to develop the thinking parallel to the practice, you go from metaphor to concept to category, back to metaphor to... And you have to keep checking it. If someone says, like, you're not making any sense anymore, and that metaphor is really a dead horse that you're currently flogging, then maybe you should go back to the other side.
Can I ask you? I want to jump in. Can I ask you, as a measure, is there any work in painters that you would painter that you would question as painting? Yes.
None that I can think of, but it's as a word, it does end up having a definition. So we can draw lines where we say, this can be a painting, this can be a painting, and that often has produced the most interesting works in an art form or a medium. But it's after that, after the challenge, and after that challenge has become stale, I think that when it stops being interesting. So definitions are fluid, of course. Language is fluid, life is fluid, art is fluid. But when does that fluidity change from interesting to to meaningless, really?
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's a good point. On the one hand, you can also have the other thing, like the moment that when modernism constantly tries to articulate the most fundamental division, what is a painting, what is the essence of painting, what can painting do, then of course it constantly tries to go to the absolute fundamentals to avoid that kind of vagueness, which is a challenge that we might not be able to completely disregard, no, because at some point it sorts things out, but it also locks things down. And when this fluidity, I do understand that at some point, especially in the commercial field, like you might get a tendency where people are trying to have it both ways, a little bit of modernism, a little bit of candy, whatever. And then at some point, I think the question is always, what are you putting at stake? No, and maybe the stakes are no longer the conclusion of the history of painting, but particular stakes. No, stakes here, stakes there in this painting, and so on.
And with that, I do think we have to thank Michelle, Bruce, and Jan for their time.